I'm Dr. Rod Hebden. Welcome to Sculpting Tomorrow, the podcast where we try and get under the skin of science and research, get away from the scaremongering and away from the overhyping it, and talk to the real people who are working at the cutting edge of science and research and helping shape tomorrow. And today we've got, again, someone who's doing something really interesting, working with loads of different researchers, but looking at it through the lens of art. So welcome to Steph Tudor, who is an interdisciplinary artist. I'm not sure what that means. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here.
We'll get into what does that mean?
Yeah, good question. So I guess it means that I work between a lot of different mediums and I work with a lot of different types of projects. So I guess it just means that I kind of move between these different forms of artwork. So just inter and then disciplinary, I guess, means like a type of work.
Yeah. Okay. That seems quite straightforward, to be fair. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's kind of a fancy art word, but relatively, you can unpick it.
So, we'll kind of get onto different things you do, because you work with lots of different research groups, and Earth Sciences, Institute for Sustainability, and some people at the Maldac Estuary, but kind of quite a range of things. So we'll get on, and you brought some things in to look at as well. But I want to kind of get into how did you end up doing this? Because, I mean, the one thing I remember, I should remember more than one thing, but one of the things I remember growing up with art is it's a lot of fun, but you can't make a living doing it. So you're kind of more or less pushed away from really doing art really seriously, I think. So how did you find yourself doing this? Was it something you just were desperate to do when you were very young?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple of questions in there, isn't there? I'd like to go back to your point about like making a living out of art, but I guess I've been really interested in creative expression since a very young age. I always found it a lot easier to draw pictures than write sentences. I remember like one of my primary school teachers, Mrs. what was her name? Miss Pat, I think. She let me write a story that was all just kind of illustrations rather than writing a story like the other kids with their writing instead of so
she sounds awesome.
She was really great. She was really, really great. I loved her a lot. You should
remember her name.
I know I should. I've also got a terrible memory, so I feel like that was kind of indicative of how I continue to kind of relate to the world and understand it. It's very much more visual and process and making than it is kind of words and facts and figures. So as I kind of went through school and college and university, it was always creativity and the more kind of making subjects that I was really interested in. So I loved design and technology, and I actually ended up doing textile design at university.
Okay. Because
I was always so interested in materials. And I ended up taking quite a kind of broad angle to textiles. It became much more about kind of materiality and kind of just a broad exploration of loads of different types of materials. And I ended up making this kind of sensory installation that was all about bringing natural materials to these kind of, I was in London at the time, and I was I'd come from the countryside, so it was I found it quite hard, quite shocking, and so my final major project was all about bringing kind of natural surfaces, natural elements back to these very sterile environments. So those were kind of the seeds of the ideas that I still think about today in my work.
So it kind of, because you grew up in Wiltshire, so kind of pretty rural.
Pretty rural.
And London was kind of exciting, but actually quite harsh.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the kind of stuff you kind of brought in, essentially that kind of rural kind of landscape.
Yeah.
Because and then you came to Swindon. Let's not,
yes,
this is
I
such a
had
discovery.
a couple of glorious
Everything comes back to Swindon. And you're so desperate to be in Swindon. Did you say you took how many buses?
I had to take 3 buses to get to college.
That's dedication.
It was dedication. But then I passed my driving test and I would drive my little Ford Fiesta.
Nice.
Yeah.
Into New College.
And Brilliant. I had my wonderful textile teachers. I can't remember their name, Karen and Kate, and they were fantastic. Yeah.
So you brought that all together. I mean, it sounds like a lot of determination, because you had to find your way, because school do tend to push you to do lots of stuff, and it's kind of, these days it's all very, it's the numeracy and the spag stuff and this sort of thing. But actually, you found your own way of expressing yourself, and then whilst doing that, brought your own childhood into your art when you went to London, essentially.
I guess so.
Nature.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, and I was really lucky to have parents that always encouraged me to follow that rather than kind of force me down a more academic route. So I'm very grateful for that. It's not like, going back to your question about kind of, pursuing a creative career. It is really challenging. It's a difficult climate currently to be working as an artist. There's few funds available, and it's tough. However, I think that the use of creativity, particularly in the face of climate change related issues, is so important. Is not only to kind of educate and bring people along, but also as a way of tackling some of these really big issues. Creativity and imagination are so important. So I think that I
think that's really interesting, because we so the festival tomorrow, we kind of, there's a lot of science, but there's a lot of arts in it, and sometimes people ask me, so where's the science, where's the art? And actually you can't tell the difference quite a lot of the time. And not, and it might be, one of my very straightforward examples is people will go and watch the planetarium, about the stars and astronomy, very, very sciencey. But these are artistic, design so projections with music and everything else, and it's all entirely communicated through art, an artistic skill. And scientists, I think, with schools, very kind of, you learn a load of things. And even if you do experiments, you learn to do an experiment the way someone's done it before. But actually, real science is creative. It's all about creative and exploration. So it's kind of lovely to see. And clearly, when you were doing your art, it sounds like you were studying textures and you're studying materials. Well, I mean, every primary school kid up will tell you materials is one of the key bits they learn in science. And so it's all kind of nicely linked together. For sure. And so what did you do from? So you're in London then studying. So you're back now. Are you Bath, Bristol? Where are you based?
I'm back. Well, I have a studio in Bristol.
So you came straight back, or when after university?
Yeah, I spent. I think I lasted about 6 months in London after I graduated, and then I moved back home to my parents for a little while. Spent about 6 months in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, interning for an artist called Nacho Carbonell, which was a eye-opening experience. It was really he's somebody that uses a lot of materials and processes to make these really exquisite sculptures. And so it was really interesting to see how a kind of big studio like that runs and how things are made. And so I learned a lot of new processes there. And I came back to the UK and decided that I would give it a go, running my own creative business. And for about 5 years I had a part-time job, and kind of that supported me through those ups and downs of the first few years. And then gradually I've just kind of been working as a self-employed artist ever since. And it's challenging, but I can't imagine another way of being. So I'm still plugging away.
It's usually going well, but no, I think the challenge never kind of stops, is it? Is the reality of it. You get used to living in that ambiguity.
Sure.
But so how did you end up, because now you seem to be doing a lot of things with researchers and working with scientists, which isn't the way a lot of artists go. How did that happen? Was that something you'd sought out, or was it accidental? Yeah.
So I think the project that I did at the Institute for Sustainability last year was probably the first time where I've had such a kind of close connection with researchers. For previous projects, I've kind of contacted researchers or biologists, or kind of gathered some information from afar to inspire the work, which is, almost always had a kind of environmental theme.
So we're just drawing on them for facts and figures, or give you a bit more to work with.
Yeah.
But still working on your own project.
Yeah. So quite kind of separated. And then I applied for the artist in residence at the Institute for Sustainability, and that was kind of the first time where oh dear, sorry. I'm glad the water's here. Yeah, so that was the first time where I had an opportunity to work so closely with researchers. And just like you were saying, I was so struck by how many synergies there were between the sciences and the arts. Like we got shown around the labs on the kind of interview day, and I found it completely fascinating. It was almost as if I was going to like different craft workshops.
Yeah,
like some of the processes.
So like artisan workshops.
Yeah.
The way the scientist works, and not what you're expecting at all.
Not what I was expecting. Which is maybe slightly naive of me to think that these things were so separated, but I think it was such an eye-opening experience to see actually how linked they were. And there was Matt Cowley, who was making these exquisite solar cells that he was using words, I forget them now, but they're like jewelry making terms, and using these kind of precious metals and this incredibly precise hand work to create these, which obviously, the purpose of them is that they're these solar cells that capture light rays, but they're also beautiful objects in and of themselves. So
it's the fabrication process just felt like an art as much as
it did. It really did. And the researchers took such care in the creation of them. And so that then kind of inspired my approach to that residency, which was very much kind of drawing out those materials and those craft processes, and kind of exploring. Yeah, I felt like a kid in a sweet shop, to be honest. It was a little overwhelming. The research that happens at the Institute is really broad and varied, and it's fascinating, and it's all so important. And it was my job to try and kind of gather at least some of those stories and try to kind of interpret them creatively. But yeah.
Yeah, and these are some of the same people we had here for a previous podcast. So
yes, in fact, I recognise them both.
Yeah. So it's a small world, and we might be doing a project together soon as well.
Yes,
later on, which you might see at the festival. People come to that. But so there's another thing I saw on your website which I wanted to get into. Actually, firstly, who funded that work, that residency?
The
EPSRC.
Thank you.
That one.
Yes, and it was to celebrate the 15 years of work that the CDT have created over that time.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of abbreviations.
Yes. Yeah. Lots of acronyms. Not so good at remembering those.
But funders like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they are a brilliant bunch to work with. We've done a few things with them. But yeah, that thing I saw on your website, which I wanted to dig into, and I don't know if it applies to that residency, was this idea of participatory art.
Yeah.
Because we talk about participation in science quite a lot now, and people are still trying to work out what that means. Yeah. How does the public participate in science when they haven't got scientific training, blah, 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 but you want them to feel ownership of it and all these sorts of things, and people try different models.
Yeah.
Is it similar? What does it mean in art? Yeah,
I guess it means something slightly different to every artist that works under that kind of umbrella of participatory art. And even for me, every project might differ in the way that I bring people along with a creative journey. So sometimes it can be as simple as kind of, well, not as simple, but it can be facilitating workshops and creating work together, and maybe that inspires some of the end artwork. And sometimes it could mean that the group is completely intertwined with every aspect of that project, and they're making the creative decisions along with you, rather than it kind of being slightly more separated. And my work kind of moves between the two. for the work for the project that I did at the institute, I did actually run workshops with the researchers. So I guess in that sense, it was a little participatory. But I guess I was doing that more as a way of kind of exploring ideas with them and offering a place for them to kind of take a bit of a step back from their work and reflect on the kind of wider context of why they're doing what they're doing. Because I think researchers are really good at going down this really, really defined tunnel. And so I was kind of asking them to just step back and be like, okay, who's this for? And, you know, what are the drivers? Yeah. And so I hope it was a valuable experience for them. And then we kind of moved through this process of then I brought in a bunch of materials, and then we were kind of exploring questions about what might their research look like in 50 years, and kind of allowing them to kind of think creatively and positively. And we were kind of toying with the idea of utopianism and how if we think without limits, then where can their work be seen in 50 years, if that makes sense. So we were just trying to kind of run with it.
So it's kind of slightly, was it quite a liberating experience? Because I mean, PhDs, they are, you know, you get told at the end of it, you're an expert in your area. You know, no one knows more about your area than you do because you've taken science research forward, you know.
Yeah.
But it's so narrow by that point.
Yeah.
And you can feel like a real fraud thinking you're an expert because you just become acutely aware of everything you don't know. And you're always, and you're fighting over things, you know, you're fighting against challenges and getting through things. So you're always looking at the hurdles and what's possible, what's not possible, and can get very kind of in the weeds a little bit. So from what you said, you're kind of taking someone who's kind of, properly in that kind of very focused, very tight space and going, actually, what would happen if you step back, think bigger?
Yeah.
Did they warm to that, or
they did? It was,
or did they fight?
Yeah, no, they did. I think. Yeah, I hope to. I think they enjoyed the process. I think if anything, it was an opportunity for them just to reflect on where they were and why they were doing it, and also an opportunity to talk with other researchers, because I was kind of inviting people in from the different parts of the IFS, and they hadn't even necessarily met. So that was quite a nice opportunity. But yeah, I think the thing that they found a little bit more challenging is when I brought in materials and I asked them to have a play, and then they freaked out. But they actually did really well.
They just kind of sat there staring at you.
They did well. I was kind of asking them to make these artifacts from the future of this world that we'd imagined together.
Just comfort zone stuff.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you record that?
I got lots of photos.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. What did you end up producing?
So then off the back of that work, I then created. So off the back of those kind of conversations and the work that they created, I then created 6 pieces inspired by the different kind of research themes, which were these artifacts from a future 50 years in the future. So one's called a filtration vessel, which is inspired by, if I can remember their names, Liana Zimpuli, Zach Warren, and Alison Martins. And actually, some of these pieces here. Okay. So this one is a 3D printed piece.
Do we lift them up? We're looking at that camera, probably, aren't we?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So this is a 3D printed ceramic. This one is actually one of the ones that went wrong, which is why I still have it, because it didn't make it into the final piece.
So for the sake of people who are just listening to the audio version of this.
Of course.
Wow. I always have to try and describe these. This one's tricky. Can I?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. What's that like? I mean, it's like a tiny cylinder, so it feels like it'd be kind of, it feels like a tub of face cream. It's that kind of,
it's got that weight to it.
It's that weight to it, isn't it? It's a little round tub of face cream, like you've taken the lid off, and I mean, actually, it's what it's made is of, because it's 3D printed. It's essentially, it's kind of looks like a load of thin worms all wound around.
Coils,
essentially, the coils and coils and coils for the outside. But yeah, so imagine you've got this little tub of ice cream. You lift the lid off, and inside, essentially, some very, very prettily and ornately structured spaghetti.
Yeah.
What is going
that would
on?
take you a long time to build in the spaghetti.
So what is this? I mean, I'm gonna. Is that yeah? There you go. There you go. That's for audio people. I'm showing that to the camera.
Yeah, I love that sensory.
But so what is going on?
So, as far as I can remember, this kind of formation in the middle is called a gyroid.
Okay.
And the reason that they're doing, so this is kind of a bigger example of the types of things that the researchers I just mentioned are printing in their labs. And the reason that they're doing that is to create the highest surface area that they can, so that when the water passes through it, contaminated water, it's hitting a really large surface area and it's able to filter it as efficiently as possible. The other part of the technology to do with that filtering system is that the materials that they would use in the actual filtering membranes, they call them, is, and if they listen to this, they might be like, "Oh, Steph, you've got that wrong." But let me try.
Good. We'll send it to them. We'll get loads of comments on the video.
She got the science wrong. Is that there's a positive charge to the material.
Okay.
Or negative.
There's a charge on the material. And an opposite charge on something else.
And it attracts the pollutants that pass through it. So they get kind of, so these eventually kind of build up with pollutants. But it's their research is looking into kind of removing forever chemicals from our waterways. So it's really, really necessary work.
And the gyroid.
Yes. Is this formation, is the kind of squiggle laid over.
Is that based on anything? Is that just a mathematical thing, or is that based on something in nature? Do you know where that came from? Or
that's a really good question. I think it's probably some very clever equation that has told the computer that that's a very high surface area.
Yeah. You tend
but it does look very nature inspired. It's true, and often. So, and some of the work that I was doing with some other researchers was all about using materials as efficiently as possible. And often what they were referencing, or what the inspiration for these very efficient building structures, for example, are often taken from the natural world. So, thinking about biodesign and things like that.
Yeah. So biomimicry.
Biomimicry, thanks,
Well, it's interesting. You can go two ways, can't you? Sometimes they kind of go, well, let's look at nature and see what's done.
Yeah.
But often we've ended up starting doing that, because when we've gone down the route of let's come up with the best mathematical and do the science, do the maths, blah, 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 work out what's the most efficient, you do it and then you discover that nature's already done it anyway.
Yes.
Just through evolution over a long period of time, nature's worked out the best thing. So why not just look at nature and see what it's done first?
Yeah.
Because the thing that reminds me of when you're thinking about the filtration system, maximum surface area, essentially is just inside of your nose. So if you think about your nostrils, I mean, and then so maybe not human, but like a dog that has an incredible sense of smell.
Yeah.
Their nose is just very, very lots of folds and lots of things, so the hair has to pass through.
You should
just
get in touch with
maximising.
the guys in the labs. They might love to hear that.
We basically need to make it a dog's nose version of this.
I love that. Yeah.
As a filtration system. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't want to look inside my dog's nose to see if it looks like that though. Are these from the same project?
Yeah, so then these, this was another researcher, called
these
Eleanor.
The same or similar?
So these are inspired by the research that Eleanor was doing, and she was looking at materials also with a high surface level, but what she was doing was getting these little. She was using ceramic also. She was getting these little samples and she was freezing them. Mm-hmm. And then she was firing them. And on a microscopic level, the freezing process would essentially leave this incredible formation of ceramic crystals.
Okay.
So that it again had this really, really high surface area. Now these
and the firing would then just fix them.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So
they would be incredibly porous.
The two things we've got here, so they're kind of a little bit narrow. They're just kind of, like 1.5 inches or something diameter. But this is a bit more like you've got lots of little brown worms, and then you've just squished them together into a tub. That's kind of, and then we emptied the tub out, and they've kind of hardened. So yeah, I mean, I could be ruder about this, but it's just lots of little brown worms. There you go. And so that's kind of one, and then the other one, slightly wider, but just much thinner. Thinner worms, really. These and it's like a worm version of the Giant's Causeway. That's what that looks like to me. So because they're all kind of slightly standing upright.
Yeah.
So we've got a tiny little. Yeah, someone's tried to 3D model the Giant's Causeway. Haven't quite got it right. It's gone a bit screwy. That's what this one is. So what is the difference between these two?
So these are just experiments that I was doing in my studio whilst that project was running. This is me just playing.
Okay, good.
So this is me like interpreting the work of Eleanor's. And so I had a go at freezing ceramics, and sure enough, when I got it out of the freezer, it had this really interesting surface area over it. As you could see, it's sort of, you know, the kind of Jack Frost pattern that you get on your car in the winter. Yeah. But as soon as it thawed, it just turned back into clay. And I think it wasn't interesting enough to, without looking at it under a microscope, it wasn't interesting enough. So what I was trying to do was kind of recreate what I thought was happening. Or at least try and recreate the type of texture and the type of crystallization, but do it in a really lo-fi way in my studio. So these are quite literally just passed through different grain, kind of, what do you call them? Different grades of sieves. Okay. So I just extruded them through sieves. And that's
extruded sounds like technical.
Extruded.
You smushed them
through
a sieve.
Yeah. And then I squished them at the bottom.
Nice.
So yeah, that's all that is.
More or less how I described that. So that's how you made it. You shoved it into a pot and it dried out. And...
Yeah, it looks as it. I think I'm really interested in exactly that, in kind of letting materials be as honest as they can. So yeah, that's what they are.
Very good. They are. They do look pretty honest, those materials. This one's more pretentious. Although it could be a dog's nose, so that brings it back down a level. So from there, so you kind of now suddenly find yourself working with scientists and research for the first time.
Yeah.
Discover they're actually kind of a bit more interesting than you thought, and a bit
Those
more.
weren't my words.
And a bit more in common with artisan craftspeople.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of in their little, rather than in their workshop, they're in their kind of science lab, but doing kind of similar kind of skills and precision and care.
Yeah.
And so did that mean you then looked for other similar projects? Because then you ended up in the west coast of Wales.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a...
Is that a weird tangent?
That's a bit of a weird tangent in that has nothing to do with researchers.
Okay, what was that?
But the themes around that project, so that was a residency. It was a 2-week residency with Jake and Scarlett, and they have this beautiful place on the front of the I'm going to get it wrong now. The
Malvach.
Perfect
pronunciation.
Estuary.
Near Barmouth, isn't it?
Near Barmouth, yeah, the English name. And it was a really wonderful 2 weeks of incredibly beautiful and very inspiring place. And I spent 2 weeks just working outside in the environment and making work that didn't last. So
by design?
By design, yes.
Okay.
Which was kind of one of the first times where I've really experimented with that way of working. I've wanted to for a long time, been very inspired by, the kind of greats of the land art world like David Nash and Andy Goldsworthy, but never felt kind of ready to go out into the landscape myself and really start interacting.
So what's the motivation, what's the kind of philosophy behind it? So ephemeral, you create something which is not going to last forever, it's just going to be weathered or destroyed, and somehow it's not, why?
Why? Well, play.
Okay.
I think for quite a few, because I almost exclusively work on commission as an artist, and often I absolutely love working with researchers. I think it's a really exciting place for me to position myself as an artist. But there is a kind of seriousness to or a kind of responsibility to need for your work to have a particular purpose and for it to be able to communicate something, and for it to be able to communicate something to the public. And so what I think the thing that I found so freeing about the residency in Wales was just time for me to explore interests of my own in a place that was kind of disconnected from any sense of feeling like my work had to be for a particular reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly freeing time. But I think what that period has opened up for me is this desire to do more work in the landscape. That project was all about kind of fragility of our coastlines in the face of rising sea levels, higher rainfall, and what that's kind of opened up for me is a way of working that wants to actually bring groups together into the landscape and work outside and work in a kind of collaborative way out in the landscape, thinking about these difficult issues rather than thinking about these difficult issues in a room somewhere, in a town somewhere.
Cut off.
Yeah.
And I kind of joke about the why, but I mean, I think
no, it's a good question.
most people have got the experience. You go to the beach and then you start drawing in the sand.
Yes.
You know, full well that's not going to last, but you still take ages and painstaking care to build the sand castle. Or my youngest kid, I write his name in the sand. I don't know why. I don't write the others. I think. I mean, they debate who's the favourite quite a lot. I think it mostly came about because they were doing it and he was too young, so I drew his name and took a picture of it, and then from then on, every time we go to the beach, I just draw his name in the sand. He's 6'2" now; he could probably do his own. But yeah, so that one's my favourite. I mean, that's not my favourite. Obviously, you don't have a favourite. But you do these things, and you kind of you see. People argue whether you should be doing them, but the whole stacking up and balancing stones, but all sorts of things that people naturally do.
Yeah.
It's just expression, isn't it? And you take great joy and care in it. Full well it won't last.
Yeah, but I think there's a real freedom in creating things that won't last. You know, I think we live in a culture where things we gather things, and things kind of there's a value to things lasting, and I think in a sense of you want the things that we buy to last, of course, but in terms of artwork and the kind of, what am I trying to say? I think one of the things that I'm thinking more and more about as I work as an artist in the time that we live in now, to me, making permanent artwork feels more and more challenging, because
as a concept,
using raw materials especially when I'm talking about kind of environmental issues, using raw materials and making something that's this kind of monolithic piece that's going to last for a very long time, for me, it's starting to lose its relevance.
So it's kind of going more to sort of the ideas of circularity.
Exactly.
So I mean, when we had the guys in from Bath before, they dealt with plastics.
Yeah.
And a lot of the plastics we use now are brilliant because they will last forever.
Yeah.
And then you discover that the fact that you've made this toy or this lid that will now last forever, long beyond all our lifetimes, is not necessarily a good thing.
Exactly.
And things which are circular that break down, not before you finish using them, but in a reasonable time scale, or can be broken down and reused, all sorts of stuff. Suddenly, creating something that permanently lasts beyond us, actually there's something kind of slightly selfish and damaging about that. So I guess this kind of brings back to that relationship, which your art seems to be all about, that relationship between landscapes and environment. So what is our relationship? It is not to scrape up things, make a monument to ourselves that will live forever, but to kind of be a bit more give take and circular in it.
Yeah, exactly. And for the focus to be about like the process and the experience rather than the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it does feel like a monument to oneself that you've made. This is so good; it should last forever. People should appreciate
which I think there's still
my dog knows.
There's still a space for sure, but I think it's just about really interrogating like why you're doing it and who's it for and what are the materials and where have they come from. It's like looking at the whole picture.
Okay, and does that, and so did you that experience, did that then lead, or again, might be entirely sort of random, just opportunity? You then working now, is it another artist in residence, or is it something else with earth sciences?
Yeah, so I'm now the fellow at Bristol University within their earth sciences department, and that's kind of like a year-long role within their department, where it's kind of less about celebrating the research that is happening there. It's more about me kind of being in the building and absorbing what's going on, and then kind of creating some work inspired by whatever whatever kind of...
You're fairly free in your scope.
Yeah.
Is that good or terrifying?
It's both.
It's quite nice to have some constraints, but what do you actually want?
Exactly. There are so many options, and I think artists are really good at, in the same way as researchers, really, again, this another parallel is kind of getting lost down rabbit holes, because I find things fascinating, and I could go down any one of these rabbit holes, and I kind of want to go down all of them. So it's like, okay, which one is most important, and which one is most, true, and take that one forward. So yeah, I've been working sort of 1 day a week for them since around February, and I think I have, the work that I was doing in Wales has informed what I'm doing with the Earth Sciences department now, where I'm just focusing on, so I wanted to keep it kind of hyper local to Bristol. I was quite aware that whenever I kind of do these projects that are about landscapes, I visit somewhere, or I go somewhere, I choose a space, or somebody invites me to a space somewhere away from my home. And so what I wanted to use the opportunity of getting a job in Bristol was to actually really zone in and really notice Bristol, because I think we begin to forget our everyday environments. They kind of become really commonplace, and we kind of don't see them for the incredible spaces that they are. And Bristol's home to the Avon Gorge, which is like the second highest tidal range in the world, I think, which is crazy. It's like on my doorstep. And it's this very, very ancient, in geological terms, it's this very, very ancient, huge kind of cut through many different types of stone. And the River Avon runs through it, this huge river. And so I'm focusing my investigations on that kind of small patch of landscape. Well, it's huge, it's vast, but my kind of field of interest around that area. And I'm working exclusively with materials that the banks of the Avon give me, and the surrounding cliffs. So I've been collecting rocks, and I've been making earth pigments, and I'm kind of built and collecting like rope that's washed up on the shore, or the silts, or the kind of flotsam and jetsam. So I'm kind of building up this materials palette of the Bristol Avon Gorge. And it's incredible, the variation in the stone. I'm getting like deep red, kind of oxide reds. I'm getting really pale pinks. I'm getting chalky whites, getting yellowy ochres. So it's just incredible, and it's allowing me to connect with the city that I know so well in a very different way, which feels really special.
And with man-made materials in there too.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they're cutting through, and I don't know the geology at all, but it sounds like it's cutting through lots of different layers geologically. So you get all the different rock types. Then I guess some of them being washed down.
Exactly.
And they're kind of sort of more sedimentary there, but you get that range anyway. But if you're bringing in rope and things, how does that? And are you getting materials where you can't work out if they're entirely natural or partly man-made, or is it really obvious? So I will be using plastics and things, because I think it's an honest snapshot of where we are, in our Anthropocenic times, where we're going to have a layer in the formation many years from now that's going to be predominantly plastic. So
you can't avoid it. And I think, you know, it is also a really versatile material. It's why it's so popular. So I think I will be able to use the plastic for various kind of knotting and tying and kind of building these kind of structures that I'm starting to make. So it gives me a bit of freedom in that sense, but it also just feels quite honest. It's the reality of that landscape. It's full of plastic. It's full of microplastics as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
weird stats of microplastics coming out now. Did you see one this week? So I was interviewed by the local community radio station teenager a few months ago, saying about, you know, do you think there's microplastics in your food, sort of thing? You know, there's something on fish, and you know, it's not an area I'm an expert on, but you know, so actually I think, you know, forget about worrying about it being in the fish you eat. It's in the air you breathe and the water you drink. You know, you're going to have microplastics in you already, even if you try and avoid different foods. And quite randomly this week, I read something, I didn't read the detail, but the headline essentially said that there was microplastic in every testicle in their study.
Oh, wow.
So they've actually, for some reason, I don't know why they changed that part of the anatomy, but they they found microplastics even in testicles. So you thought, well, it's literally every organ in your body we've now got in. We're sort of permeated.
And also then that suggests that you would then pass it on to the next, or one would then pass it on to the next.
One of the things we don't know yet, which we discussed with the previous people from Bath, is we've no idea whether microplastics in our body is, you know, good or bad or nothing.
Insignificant.
Yeah. It might be it's not damaging at all. It might be it gives us superpowers. However, it might be incredibly damaging. And that kind of a precautionary approach says we shouldn't be just filling ourselves with microplastics if we don't know what they will do. So that idea, and I've not thought about it until you said it like that. So obviously when you look at geological layers, you know, and you kind of look at the different layers and you go, okay, and you know, you can go down this and you can find the Romans. But if you go geologically, you find, you know, where dinosaurs and different rock layers. But then you're describing when people look back in time, whether these are people or something else, when they look at the era we're living in now, our layer of geology will essentially be a layer of plastic.
Well, there'll be
not a solid layer of plastic. But it'd be identified or identifiable by the high concentration of plastics in our layer of geology.
Yeah, and who knows, you know, in the same way that we mine for coal today, people might mine for plastics, you know, who knows what might happen. But it's just kind of fascinating and also quite chilling to think about the impact that we're going to leave behind. But I was sorry, maybe that's a bit of a depressing statement, but after your introduction of
not being too depressing. No, I mean, I think I don't think we. Yeah, I always try. I don't want to get to the point where we're just going, let's scare people with plastics for sure, or to go, we've solved it with science either, or is plastic brilliant in a purely kind of celebratory way. But I do think what we should be talking about is, okay, what do we want? You know, this is what we're learning. We're learning what way we're doing things leaves microplastics. We're learning that we can be more circular in our approach. We're learning all these things. This is what technology tells us. This is what creativity tells us. So it's about going, okay, so what do we want? How do we want, looking back on now, people to be saying what we did or what legacy we leave? So that's kind of where it becomes, okay, right, let's get into this. What you know, and it feels like the work you're doing with researchers then gets them to step out of their bit and see it in a bigger way. And potentially when you, I guess, is there a point at the end of this residency at Bristol where you'll present your work, or are the people involved along the way?
Yeah, so it's slightly open-ended in when it actually finishes, but I'm hoping again to do some kind of participatory work with the researchers, whether that's me taking them out on a walk and just getting everyone to kind of interact with the landscape in some way, or reflect on kind of how they feel about their research when they're actually out in the landscape that their research is about. So just kind of making those making those crossovers again. And then, yeah, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat again. Not used to talking this much. So I plan to do some more kind of interactive work with the researchers again, bringing groups together from different disciplines, and then I'll create another body of work. I think mostly what I'll be doing for this project is again making work out in the landscape, documenting it, and kind of letting it erode, because the kind of theme that I'm exploring for this project is all about cycles of creation and erosion. So thinking about geological cycles. I went on this fascinating walk facilitated by Mathilde Braddock, who is a geologist, and she introduced me to the concept of geological recycling, which just blew my mind. I'd never really thought about that before.
In fact, rocks, because rocks are permanent, right?
Yeah, rocks are always
permanent.
there. Like, yeah, they might weather a bit, but they're always there. But no, they might have been. Maybe they're in their like 5th cycle of being a rock. You know, because they get weathered, they get turned into grains, sand grains. They wash down into our rivers. They settle on the ocean floor. They get buried. They compress. They get sunk again. They get
turned into sandstone or something.
And then they get pulled up into a mountain ridge, and the whole process starts again. So I was just like, that's incredible.
So it kind of pulled you out and said, actually, look at this on a bigger scale.
Yes, exactly.
So timescales wise, you think a rock is a rock.
Yeah.
That's just a snapshot of the rock's life.
Yeah, exactly. And just trying to get my head around, geological scales, which are so vast and make our tiny part of history feel so incredibly small. But then thinking about, smaller time scales, whether that's the more recent kind of shifts in our climate through different kind of ice age periods, and then thinking about decades of change and human change, industry coming along, industrialization coming along, and then right down into seasonal changes through the year, and then tidal changes through the day. So kind of just thinking about this huge scale of different cycles. And so it feels relevant or important that the work that I make is in a cycle of its own. So we'll see. I don't know what the end result will be.
It sounds fascinating.
I might have nothing to show.
Are some of these relevant to the Mauldach or the...
Yeah, so actually most of these are, this is relevant to the Mauldach.
Okay.
And
that looks like, well, it's either a very, very small duvet. It's like rice paper that's kind of hard, wrinkly, but it's kind of nicely checked, like it is a sort of duvet design or something, or potentially a snotty tissue, which has gone hard and crispy.
Kind.
It's more aesthetically pleasing than that. But for audio, I'm not sure how to describe it otherwise.
The sensory feeling of it.
How would you describe that for people listening?
Oh, I think rice paper is a really nice one.
That was nicer than a tissue, was
it? Yeah. Well, it's made from seaweed,
okay.
So that might give listeners a better understanding of what it feels like. Like a kind of.
I'm holding back, but it feels quite crunchy.
Oh, do you want to just?
I feel like I want to crunch
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
Brilliant.
So tell me about this. Made of seaweed, and I'm going to put it down. There you go. Oh, the camera. There you go. I won't crunch it.
So whilst I was there, I was getting really, really interested. So there was a whole bunch of a whole bunch of engineering works happening to Barmouth Bridge when I was there. Barmouth Bridge is, I think it's Victorian, and it's, I mean, you must know it. Being a Welsh lad.
It doesn't mean I've been everywhere in Wales.
Have you been to Barmouth?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. It's very iconic.
Yeah.
And I think it has engineering works done to it every year. It's got these like posts going into this massive, massive estuary. And it's just like, there's something so kind of sweet, but also futile about this constant engineering that they're doing to this bit of infrastructure. if humans weren't intervening with that, it would just, over the next couple of years, it would just completely erode. So I was thinking a lot about structures and engineering that attempt to keep the natural elements
fixed somehow.
Yes, fixed somehow, in
it's
control.
Essentially a bit King Canute sitting, holding back the tide.
Yes.
Same idea.
Exactly.
The engineers are in Barmouth.
Yes.
Attempting to hold back the geological processes.
Exactly.
Okay.
All over the world, really. So you must be wondering, what on earth does that piece of seaweed say about that issue? But this is just one of the pieces. As I say, most of the work I made there just got washed back to the tide. So I was thinking a lot about kind of grids and very kind of simple structures and repetition and building methods, really, but taking a very gentle and fragile approach to making these structures. So this is intentionally very, very fragile. It's just squares of seaweed stuck together with its own seaweed glue. And then I let it dry out. And what I did with the other ones was that
To be fair, it looks far prettier than it sounds when you say it's seaweed stuck together by its own seaweed glue.
Or a snotty tissue.
Yeah, it looks more aesthetically pleasing than either of those descriptions.
So yeah, that's just kind of an example of I guess the direction that I'm going with this more. And I guess also going back to my textile roots as well, thinking a lot about the way of joining materials together and making something else out of a very simple material. Yeah.
Okay.
And these were also part of the work that I did at the Institute for Sustainability. So this is I'm just beginning to play around with some straw, which was, so I was working with a researcher called Charlie Taylor and her, what do you call him? Well, I don't know what he is to her. As in, she's the PhD student and he is supervisor. Thank you. Yes, Will Hawkins, and they are looking into carbon net zero building materials.
Okay, so this is something looking at building with straw. So this is essentially a bundle of small bundle of straw.
Yeah. So it's just, again, for this project, I particularly worked in a very materials way, and I never really have a sketchbook. I don't really draw. The way that I work out ideas is by making lots of little models, essentially, and then eventually they kind of develop into something bigger.
I love the fact that when you were a kid in school and they asked you to write a story, so I don't really write words, so they asked you to draw it.
And now I won't even draw.
So I don't really draw. I just make
I refuse to pick up pens and pencils.
Basically, anyone asks you to do something, you go, no, I have my own medium. So if I ask you to do sculpture, I don't really make things.
Yeah.
I'm going to sing it.
God, that makes me sound really awkward, doesn't it?
Not at all.
You'll ask me to make a sculpture and I'll be like, I'll make you one, but it will erode in a few days.
Yeah, so. exactly. You won't be able to
enjoy it whilst you can.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it was like. And these look like little white lumps of chocolate. What was the chocolate bar that used to have the very sexist adverts where they were like chocolate bars for men because they were chunky?
Oh, Yorkies.
Yorkies. It looks like bits of a Yorkie bar.
Oh, I don't think I've ever had a white chocolate one.
White chocolate ones didn't exist.
Oh.
You've basically invented white chocolate Yorkie.
Fantastic.
I know.
That's making me want a Yorkie bar. Those are actually blocks of mycelium.
Hang on, put those down.
Oh.
No, so tell me about that.
So
mycelium
they won't
is
start
essentially
growing
fungus.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly. It's the mycelial network, and then the fungus is the fruiting body of a mycelial network. So this is when they were kind of damp and they were growing. They had like little mushrooms coming out the top, but the white silkiness that you see is just the mycelium, which is the kind of you might see it on the forest floor if you turn over a log.
Okay.
That kind of white, sort of fibrous.
Okay, like networks, almost like roots, but
yeah.
Okay.
And so it's been used more and more. It's being used a lot by artists and designers doing some really exciting sculptural and kind of architectural stuff. And it's being used more and more in the building industry as a insulator.
Okay.
So you can grow it to the shape and size that you want, which is incredible. It's very carbon efficient. it just needs a slightly warm and damp environment to grow. And then for industrial purposes, you just cook it. That kills the mycelium, and then it will last a good long time as long as it's kept dry. So it's a really incredible material.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're not harvesting it, or you would be at this sort of scale, but from industrial scale, they don't harvest it from not digging up the earth and taking all that.
No.
They're actually growing their own.
Good point. Yeah. No, you can gather. I mean, it's a good question. I wonder how the industrialized process of mycelium did start. I would imagine they probably did take a few mycelium kind of spores, and then they just grow it and grow it and grow it. You know, in the same way that like a mold would just keep multiplying. But now,
do you think they've got like a little starter, like when people make bread?
Yeah.
And they just share it around.
Yeah, quite possibly. But they all come from one kind of mother mycelium. That's quite a lovely thought. But they're really kind of sci-fi affairs. I don't know if you've ever seen like a kind of.
I mean, there's a sci-fi apocalyptic movie or show, isn't there?
About mushrooms.
Yes. Isn't the one Last of Us? Wasn't that? It was a computer game. They turned it into a TV show with Pedro Pascal.
I'm not very.
And it's essentially a zombie movie.
Okay. Oh,
but
where the fungus gets into the
yes.
brain. I know vaguely of this.
And so they get all hideous because the fungus is essentially like growing out of them and all sorts.
Is that why you were nervous about touching these?
Yeah, I don't touch this because essentially this is the beginning.
You don't want the fungus to take over your brain.
This is the beginning of a movie. I know how this ends.
They're just if you let these grow, I think they're oyster mushrooms. They're very delicious. Okay. So yeah, they're not the infecting the brain type, luckily.
Yeah, okay. That does sound nicer. Fair enough.
But yeah, so these kind of materials, and this one as well. This is a hemp and PLU, polylactic acid, PLA, sorry, polylactic acid bioplastic.
So this
naturally derived
is a thin. This is like a place setting. I'm describing it. So basically, this is just a flat rectangle.
Yeah,
is what we're looking at. Well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to be rude now. It is pretty, but it's also it's basically thin. It's kind of translucent, so you can kind of see through it a bit. But it's also woven with. It looks like it's full of hair.
Yeah, it does look quite hairy.
It's quite hairy.
Do you know what it is? Any guesses?
Is it hair? So there's bits of sawdust in there, or bits of wood in there. What is the hair? That's not mycelium?
No, it's not. It's hemp.
Hemp
fiber.
Hemp fibers.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is one of those incredible plants that grows very quickly. It traps a lot of carbon dioxide in the soil, and it's just kind of an incredible plant. Its fiber is incredibly strong. So this is just a kind of very simple example of how it might be able to be used in composite materials to make them, in plastics to make a composite material to make them a lot stronger.
Okay.
Yeah.
We did the PLA in that other podcast.
Yes.
About that.
Yeah.
And this is the equivalent, and they had something a bit. It must have been analogous in some ways. So you're using the hemp almost the way we use steel in reinforced concrete.
Yeah.
So if it was just the PLA, just like if it was just concrete, it'd be quite brittle.
Yeah.
Whereas by weaving this through, you kind of give a bit more structure and give more give and stops it just being a thing that will just fracture.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put it down to make sure I don't fracture it.
You won't. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. Yeah.
Okay. And that just feels like a challenge. I'll leave it alone. Not try and break it.
So that was part of a piece that was called House Kit, which was inspired by Will and Charlie's work, and it was this idea that at some point, at 50 years in the future, that house builders, architects and builders and home builders would be used to working with a very kind of constrained, localized material palette.
Right.
So using what they have around them, it might even change from season to season depending on what's growing, and that you kind of have these interchangeable, almost like building blocks to make up your house. So with this like beautiful myriad of reclaimed and organic materials. And then at the end of that house's life, because it's made up of these kind of pre-built blocks, that those can then be either repurposed and used in the next house, or they could just be given back to the earth and decomposed.
Just work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're going to be doing. So we don't know quite what we're going to be doing yet, do we? So we've just got some fun, and we discovered, was it like yesterday?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That we're going to be doing a project in Swindon over the autumn.
Yeah.
Which we're doing lots of different groups. So I have to find out which. And what's exciting about this for me is I have no idea what's going to happen.
Me neither.
And we filled in the application form. So we've kind of told people we're going to do, but essentially it's going to be working with you, so doing some participation with members of the public to create some public artwork using, I don't know what sort of materials, natural materials. Will work with Bath University, might be some interesting plastics, all sorts.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
In a slightly,
Me too.
It's good, and I feel it's slightly trepid kind of, don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Let the creative process roll
exactly.
up. Yeah, I think it would be really nice to, to kind of pick up some of the themes that emerged in the project that I was doing with IFS, and get members of the public to kind of get their hands into these materials and think creatively about how they can use plastics, how they can use kind of bioplastics and biocomposites, and I think the idea is that we're going to make something collaborative together. So that would be a really fun challenge to think about how we can bring all these different ideas together and make something kind of impressive and beautiful. Yeah,
that does sound amazing. So yes, I mean, you can't go to the website and find out more about this at the moment because we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So watch this space.
Yeah.
Looking to the future then, I mean, you've clearly kind of, it's actually more recent than I thought, got into kind of working with scientists and researchers, but you seem to be doing a lot of it now, and seem to be enjoying it.
I love it.
It's kind of giving a different angle to what you're doing.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the future, either for your practice, or for how you think your artistic practice or things like it can affect change and can change what the future might look like? There's a big question.
Oh, yeah.
You can start with the first one first. What do you want to do in the future?
Good question. I think I would really love to continue working with researchers and work over longer periods of time in slightly more kind of embedded ways, and then create opportunities for groups, members of the public, to interact with those researchers or interact all of us in a group. Yeah, I think I would like to work on projects in environments that are facing difficulties driven by climate change, and kind of position myself as their kind of community artist, and we can work through issues together, and I can bring in researchers just to kind of bridge that gap between the things that they read in the news and the things that are actually happening in science centres and research and institutions all over the world. There's so much incredible and hopeful work happening in these places, and so I suppose I would like to try and connect the people doing the work with the people who need the work.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, like you had, as you were saying, you had a little idea of what scientists did. Really, till you got there and you're quite surprised.
Yeah.
I think we do have this, and it's perpetuated by TV and media and all that stuff, but perpetuated by universities really as well. This idea that scientists go and they do this kind of clever stuff, but it's all very behind closed doors. And either it's Frankenstein science we're scared of, AI is going to kill us all.
Yeah.
Or it's they've created this new miracle material that's going to solve everything, whether it's fusion energy or it's something else. And people either get turned off and terrified by the horrible stuff, or they get kind of cynical about the stuff that's over-promising. And actually they're linking people together and go, actually, no, this is really what's going on, and this is what we really can do. And let's see what we can do together. Feels like a much more healthy way of going about it. So yeah,
I hope so.
if we can start doing a little bit of that in Swindon, that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
even though this is a short project, we can start to build.
Absolutely.
So one last object before we get, what is that thing there? That thing.
Good question.
Can I call it a thing?
Yeah, you can call it a thing.
Cool.
So
I quite like it.
This is a project that has been going on for quite a few years now. I think it's
that's kind of awesome.
I guess I bought this to kind of show the the development of ideas for me over the last kind of 5 years. So this is very symbolic of work that I've done kind of previous to this type of work that I've been talking about, which is much more involved with researchers and is thinking much more about the life cycle of the work.
Okay, so
this is a bit more traditional.
Looking at it, it's not actually clear which way up it should be, because you had it pointing down at this before, and it looked like it's kind of almost diamond shaped. So it's a kind of lump, fits kind of fairly comfortably in my hand, a little bit big to hold in my hand. But if you think about a dime with a pointy bit at the bottom, the top is almost like it's like a ceramic really, and it's sort of off-white with flecks of slate kind of poking through, but really nice and smooth, those top surfaces. And then turn it over, and suddenly it becomes a slate mountain. And something, something, it feels like Game of Thronesy really. So all the slates form the outside, all kind of thin things pointing up to a central sort of peak. I'm not sure how else I describe that, other than it could also, this is my rude description, you always get one. It slightly reminds me of the Gremlins. Do you remember Gremlins? The film? You ever watched Gremlins?
No.
So it starts off with a guy who's an inventor going and buying this creature. But he invents all sorts of random things, and he invents an automatic ashtray. And it's kind of reminiscent of his automatic ashtray. I could feel like this could also be quite a practical object somehow for putting out your cigarettes and neutralising. Anyway, that's my rude version.
I love it. Okay,
other than that, I think it's a beautiful thing. It's just a thing of beauty.
I mean, ashtrays can be beautiful.
A nice bit of rock.
They did pretty well in the 70s, didn't they?
They did. Yeah. Fancy ashtrays, exactly.
So it's not an ashtray. So this is. So yeah.
Have I got it upside down? Is that right? Yeah.
So
does not matter.
It doesn't really matter, but this is the way that it will be.
Okay.
So this is a model of a much larger piece of work that I'm making, which will be installed in a public space in Bristol over the next year or so. And this is one of a series, and they will be kind of play objects and seats. So some of them are just kind of like little pieces to sit on, and some of them are kind of designed to jump on and slide down them. And I guess I bought this because it's I wanted to kind of talk about that, moving away from making very permanent artworks, but then also, thinking about the reality of making a living from art, and that sometimes doing the more commercial type work is the way to make a living. So this is a public art commission, and it's inspired by the series of pieces are inspired by insect eggs. Insect eggs are incredible things. They are, if you look at them under a microscope, I don't know if you've ever seen any of those beautiful books where seeds are photographed under a microscope.
I don't think I have, or of ours some time ago.
Yeah, they're incredibly sculptural, and each one is so different to the next, and they're really ornate and yeah, they're sculptural, they're beautiful, they're pieces of art in themselves. Insect eggs are very similar. They are incredible. Once you start, again, going down that rabbit hole of researching insect eggs, you're just like, what? So this is...
Google's going to go a bit weird.
Yeah. This is inspired by an insect egg, and they're kind of... I'm making 11 in total. Some of them are made from stone. This is a composite material with reclaimed slate in it.
Yeah.
And the idea is that each one of them is going to have this, is in some way is going to be very, very deeply textured, and so the insects will re-inhabit the pieces So they're kind of like ecological habitats and also human habitats, because humans will be sitting and playing with them. So this is what I'm currently making. It's been a project that's been on the back burner for about 5 years. If I wouldn't necessarily do this project again. I think the reason that I bought this is just to kind of show the development of the style of my work. So going back to that point I was making earlier about these kind of legacy pieces, these monoliths, these pieces that have been using raw materials. Whilst I've used an awful lot of reclaimed materials in this, it still has a very long-lasting composite material. So yeah, just kind of thinking about the lifespan of materials and artworks an awful lot more than I used to. Basically.
It is amazing. Yeah. No, that's it's really interesting to hear. And I think kind of, we think about materials and just think, types. Teachers get really sick of teaching about materials. It's like, how many times can they point at a chair and say, why is it made out of wood? But actually, when you talk about materials, it's not just the uses, but I mean, it's the meaning that it inhabits and the parallels and the circularity, and about, you start talking about geological timescales, and so it's fascinating stuff. We're really looking forward to working with you in Swindon coming up.
Likewise.
And seeing you, hopefully seeing you at the fest in February with it too. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you very much for coming in. It's been amazing. It's been amazing. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.